isolate to an even greater extent. This revenue generating proposal would extract resources from the largest companies in the city of Chicago. These are companies that have more than 500 employees. We would raise the rate per month to $33 on roughly 175 companies, which we project would raise roughly $82 million. What this fund would do, and it would continue to drive violence down in the city of Chicago, ensuring that our community violence intervention workers are supported, that we can continue our youth employment and diversion programs, services for survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence, and of course, mental health care for our first responders. What types of companies would this impact? Well, we're talking about the largest corporations, of course, in the city. We are not talking about your local retail shops, however. We are not talking about your mom and pop restaurants. We are talking about the companies who have done exceedingly well in this current economic climate. Some of these names you might recognize: JP Morgan, Walmart, Accenture. JP Morgan, for example, brought in $57 billion in profit last year. And keep in mind, you all, they received $11 billion in additional profit from the 2024 Trump tax breaks.
But they didn't get that from Chicago. They got that from having operations worldwide. JP Morgan didn't bring that in Chicago specifically. They can't, Jesus Christ. Shout out to JP Morgan Chase. And the reason why I'm saying shout out to JP Morgan Chase is because JP Morgan Chase recently committed to investing in Detroit more, putting billions and billions and more dollars in Detroit. And while they continue to divest out of Chicago, they're investing in Detroit. As a matter of fact, JP Morgan committed to taking up almost a whole floor in the new Hudson's building, in addition to their new headquarters over in New York. So shout out to Chicago. I'm glad that y'all mayor is doing what y'all doing, because competition is fierce and they're definitely going to make adjustments.
Which, as I've been saying, was the largest upward transfer of wealth in our nation's history. We're talking about banks like Citigroup, which made $11 billion last year, and companies like Mondelez, the world's largest snack company, reaching more than 150 countries. Don't misunderstand me. We are certainly proud of.
It's amazing how little this guy actually knows and how much he's basically pushing out employers and resources in Chicago when they need it more than ever right now.
What they prioritize is a talent pool, which Chicago certainly has. But to attract more people, we need to continue to drive crime and violence down. Our work is nowhere near from being complete. If we look at a company like Bank of America, for example, they made $27 billion in profit last year, an additional $4 billion from the Trump tax cuts. The community safety surcharge would account for roughly 0.0008% of their annual revenue. That's less than 1,000%. Another myth that we need to dispel is the idea that this would be a, quote, job killer, unquote. Let's remember, you all, we had this tax in place for more than 40 years. When you ask what city has this worked in, well, it worked in Chicago. And we know that it can work again. When we look at Chicago employment trends over time on the chart on the left.
The reason that he's saying this is because they tried it in Seattle and they immediately killed it, because Amazon and Microsoft are the biggest employers over in Seattle, and they wasn't having none of that.
It certainly goes up in Chicago. When it falls nationally, it also falls in Chicago. We do not find a sustained explosion. I'm sorry, we do not again find a sustained explosion in jobs after the repeal. In fact, it is difficult to tell where on this chart the repeal even happens because the trend remains constant. On the right, we see Chicago's comparative employment growth over the national average for the past 20 years. What you'll see is the period while we still had the corporate head tax had stronger job growth compared to the national average than the periods after repeal. This local margin at the cost of the repeal. Instead, Chicagoans got higher property taxes, more regressive fines and cuts to services, while large corporations essentially got a tax cut. When you look at the combined tax rates of major cities, accounting for all the relevant direct and indirect taxes, you can see that Chicago has one of the lowest corporate tax rate of any major city in the country. We have the lowest of the 3 largest cities and the 4th lowest of the top 4 municipal economies.
Which was the only reason why Chicago grew at the rate that it grew and why it was able to become the biggest city within the Midwest. But I got a feeling that that's going to start to change a little bit.
So in summary, number 1, the new model we are putting forward, responding to what we have heard from alders and residents, focuses on just the top few hundred companies. Number 2, the new model accounts for less than 0.1% for these companies. Number 3.
Now imagine if every city did that.
Job boom failed to materialize. Number 4, the repeal cost Chicagoans hundreds of millions of dollars.
What was that?
That was made up for in property taxes, regressive fines, and cuts. And finally, contrary to what you will read in the editorial boards, Chicago lags other major cities and taxing corporations to fund vital services for our residents. I do appreciate the special attention to today's presentation. And with that, me and my administration are happy to take any of your questions.
First, what happens in your view to city services, to paychecks for employees, and so on?
Well, thank you for that. Again, I'm working overtime to avoid such a scenario. We all know that the last time a budget was this contentious is when Mayor Harold Washington was the mayor, and there was a block of 29 that were quite obstinate against the efforts to transform our economy. And so that's why our team is working overtime, repeating our desire to continue to build a coalition that allows for the city of Chicago to be a model for the rest of the country. So as I
imagine Chicago being a model for the rest of the country.
Expressed yesterday, that scenario we're working to avoid. And, obviously we're not the federal government. There would be severe consequences if such a thing were to take place.
Like missing paychecks and city services not being implemented.
If the government is not funded, that is just one example of how horrific that would be for working people. Let me also say that if this budget sacrifices working people in order for it to be balanced, that is a scenario that we are working to avoid as well. We don't believe layoffs and furloughs is a healthy approach towards balancing our budget, particularly not at this time.
I want to get your reaction to the Federal Transit Administration threatening to withhold some funds from the CTA unless the city and state increase law enforcement. They were citing the attack on Bethany McGee. What's your response to that, and will you make any changes to how CBD is deployed to the trains and buses?
Well, as I've said over and over and over and over and over and over again, public safety is my top of the top priorities. And that's why we are working on ensuring that we make the necessary investments so that people will continue to ride our public transportation system and that they can do.
When he says necessary investments, and again, this is one of the reasons why I hate politicians. When he says necessary investments, he's talking about community groups, because what they're really doing is they're defunding the police. They asked their police department to cut almost $100 million from the budget, and the police department is already down thousands of officers. So when he says the necessary investments, he's not saying that he's hiring more police officers. He's not saying that he's actually going to deploy the CPD, the Chicago Police Department, to, these trains, the MTA and all of this stuff, right? What he's basically saying is the necessary funding. So you're not going to get more public safety or any of these trains or any of the public transportation systems to be more, to be safer We already know people that got burned up on Chicago's trains and all of this stuff, which you can't put that on the shoulders, objectively speaking. You can't put that on the shoulders of Brandon Johnson and say he's responsible for the crime, but he's also responsible for the funding that goes towards preventing and solving for a lot of the crimes that don't get solved for and people getting out of jail. And then you also have the Safety Act, which he was a huge advocate for, that lets out people that's not supposed to be there, on top of trying to police illegal migrants and housing and funding the whole illegal migrant crisis that's over in Chicago. So when you combine all of that together, and then you know that he was a big proponent of defunding the police, he was one of the biggest proponents of it before he ever even became mayor. When you think about when they say, and they use specific terms like, you know, I want to fund community investment or the necessary funding for, you know, public safety, they won't say specifically we're trying to hire more police officers, or we need to put more police officers on the street, or we need to increase our ranks and that's where our budget needs to be. They use strategic words to avoid responsibility while not addressing the real issue that Chicagoans have. It's just the truth.
It safely. The feeling and the emotion and the experience of having crime occur on our public transportation system.
The feeling, the emotion, and the experience. It's a very easy way to communicate this. Hey, listen, we need to stop the crime and nobody should be assaulted on these trains. And that's why we're deploying more police officers into our MTA.
Is certainly detrimental to our city as a whole. And
All
so
words,
that's why,
man.
whether it's with funding, making sure that there are safety and security measures in place, making sure that our public transportation system is supported with entities that address homelessness and as well as mental health. It's a full force of government approach. And we're going to continue to collaborate with the state and the county and all of our partners to ensure that every single rider feels absolutely safe.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
What will the new revenue projection from this revised corporate head tax mean for the buckets of categories that the revenue funds, like gender-based violence, officer wellness, all of those categories? Do you have updated revenue projections and what's most affected by this $18 million loss?
What are you
18
referring to?
So this new revised corporate head
82
tax
million.
would be
Okay.
82 million.
Yeah.
So what's most affected by that drop from 100 million to 82 million?
The program for small business grants would not be funded. But all of
Oh,
the
I
other-
got you. So all of the other categories would remain at the same
Yes.
revenue.
That's
projections.
correct.
Okay. Some of the 26 alders, as you know, have taken issue with who oppose your budget, have taken issue with you personally not showing up to the meetings this past weekend. Are you considering, as you talk about this revised corporate head tax, personally showing up to pitch it to alders who oppose
Yeah,
your
I'm
budget?
terribly sorry that they feel that way, especially because I've had regular interactions with city council members on a consistent basis. Keep in mind, that was one meeting. Do you know how many meetings we've had with alders around this budget? Dozens and dozens and dozens of meetings, right? So, I do appreciate their desire to see my face, and I have the
This guy is such a narcissist.
best,
He is really a narcissist in real life.
most capable, competent, loving powers. I had the budget drop last
Business are more amicable too.
well,
Good morning, Mayor.
good morning.
Has the business community, any specific groups, been consulted already about this revised head tax proposal, and do you believe it's something that they're more amicable to?
Well, I mean, do I believe the Bears can get into the playoffs? I don't know if it's,
Was that some? This guy's the worst fucking politician ever. Oh my gosh, bro! Didn't they lose the Bears? Do I think that the Bears could get into the playoffs? What?
appropriate for me to, put an over under on, a belief. What I can tell you is that we're working within the confines of the facts, and the facts do matter here. That, CEOs have said to me repeatedly, Mayor Johnson, we need you to confront head on the issue of violence in this city. And I took that challenge and I take it seriously. And they've also said they believe in the programs that we're investing in. CVI, check. They believe in youth employment, check. In fact, many of these corporations, we're working with them to help us expand youth employment. So, we've had constant conversations with interest groups that have expressed opposition to them paying 0.0008% into community safety. The last thing that I will attempt to say around this is that this is an investment. The return on this investment from our largest corporations would be to save more lives and to create more opportunities for people. That's a worthwhile investment.
And for the roughly 350 companies that would be affected,
175. Is that correct?
it said 350
I
on
know.
the slide.
It was not updated.
It's
so apologies.
175.
It's actually 175.
Regardless, for the roughly 175 companies that would be affected, do you have a dollar figure for how much that would translate to monthly and annually for those companies?
Thank you for the homework assignment. If that number is important to you, we'll try to do that math. Jill, thank you.
Good morning. Do you plan to work with the CTA at all to address these safety demands from the
Do I
FTA?
plan to work? We work with the CT all the time.
Are there specific measures that you'd like to see
Yeah,
as
so
you
as we
receive?
talked about, like these investments, again, as I've said repeatedly, we do have to look at what the security apparatus looks like for public transportation. CPD plays a role in that. The City Department of Public Health plays a role in that. All of us play a role in ensuring that CTA riders experience maximum safety.
They sent a letter. Do you plan to respond to the
Yes.
FTA? You do?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we heard from one rider this morning that they think it might be an overreach from the federal government to send you and the governor a letter to make these demands. Do you feel that way?
I believe that what this administration is doing, there's no question that they have not only trampled on our Constitution, but I don't need a letter from the Trump administration to tell me what my priorities are, because we've already made them clear what our priorities are. And we certainly, do not need an administration that continues to politicize, on what really could be addressed collectively. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
How are you? This is another question about the transportation letter that was just sent overnight. Last question with this is basically you all don't have a permanent leader over CTA right now. So how does that put more pressure on you and other leaders here in the city and within the county to try to make this safer for riders?
Yeah, there's no pressure there. No.
Morning, Mayor.
How is it no pressure if you don't even have anybody that's manning and leading the Chicago Transportation Authority?
Good morning.
I'm wondering if you put this new proposal out, do you figure this is going to give you, allow you to pick off a few of the opposition alders, as I might call them, and will you then go ahead and present a budget in the coming days or next week to get a vote on your plan?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, there are some alders that have expressed a desire to concentrate this revenue stream for community safety to a more hyper group of corporations. This does that. In fact, one thought was if we establish this revenue stream using the guidelines of what the federal guidelines constitute as a small business, I put that in quotations intentionally, this certainly addresses that. But it also ensures that the people who still believe that this is a worthwhile investment, that it protects us in that regard as well, right? Because there are a number of alders that have made it very clear that absent this community safety fund, they would have a difficult time supporting this budget, right? So do I think that this places us in a stronger position? I do, because, again, you all have asked, and I've repeatedly demonstrated my willingness to have compromise around the details of my values. Here is yet another example where our values and investing in community safety are maintained and negotiating the details around that to ensure that we can still accomplish it. That's what.
So let me tell y'all what's really happening. All right. Let me give y'all the skinny after all of this word salad and all of this stuff, right? This is what's going to happen. Property taxes are going to continue to go up in Chicago. Businesses are going to continue to be taxed in Chicago. Businesses will leave Chicago at an alarming rate, both small businesses and large businesses. They will continue to divest from Chicago, which will basically create a much faster doom loop than you ever thought of before. The burden will continue to be shifted onto the middle class and to the people that are in less desirable neighborhoods. And they're going to try to sell you on the idea that the value of the property is going up, and that's why your property taxes is going up. That is going to expedite the possible bankruptcy. And I predict I am going to tell you the same way that I told you the year before and the year before that. Chicago's previous budget deficit was expected to be $1.15 billion for this year. It is $1.6 billion this year. Next year, it is going to be projected to be 1.5 to 1.6 billion. And it's probably going to go up to 1.8, 1.9. The interest rates that Chicago is paying because they were recently downgraded is going to go up. Chicago is going to look to borrow more money to fill in budget holes and budget gaps, which will then be spread out evenly amongst property taxpayers. And they're going to try to figure out how they can tax more while businesses continue to leave the city. All while Trump highlighting how they feel like the numbers are going down. You're going to see juicing of the numbers. You're going to see misrepresentation of how they report on crime. You're going to see less police officers, less community advocates. And I also predict there's going to be more people that get way more money and try to siphon out all of them dollars and tax dollars out of Chicago. And then eventually you'll have a situation where within a few years, maybe 5 at the most, it'll possibly be bankruptcy time. Because, and this is the reason why, Chicago does not outline a path to profitability as a city. Right now, they are in what I like to call crisis mode. Crisis mode is, how do we kick the can down the road for next year, but we're not outlining a way for the city to be successful and to recover, and then to ultimately be able to balance our budget pre-COVID spending. They are not getting more businesses coming to the city. They are not opening up more small businesses. They are not generating more revenue. And that is the biggest problem in Chicago. Listen to what I'm saying. In any company, and let's be clear, whether you're talking about your own household, regular personal budget, or you're talking about running a business, or you're talking about a major business that is a publicly traded company, or you're talking about a city, or you're talking about the federal government. If you don't increase revenue, you will die. You cannot cost cut your way to success unless it is paired with opportunity that then increases revenue. It is like Kmart. Chicago is Kmart. Chicago is Sears. When Kmart was dying and Walmart was rising, what Kmart tried to do was finesse shareholders by saying, Kmart and Sears, they tried to finesse shareholders by saying, well, we're going to cut costs and we're going to continue to reduce spending while increasing prices, and hopefully we'll be able to compete and ultimately we'll be able to get ourselves out of this situation. What I'm trying to tell you is that if there is no pathway to growth, profitability, you cannot continue to ride the backs of people that cannot afford to continue to pay higher taxes and property taxes. The schools will continue to be defunded. Police officers will continue to be defunded. And he will continue to try to blame Trump for what this city is to become. You have to generate revenue. You cannot not generate revenue. If you go to war with the business community that pays the majority of the taxes, listen, I don't care how much money you continue to go through. Think about it like this. Let's say you make $100,000 a year, right? And you funding the lifestyle of your side chick. Or you funding the lifestyle of your main hoe. Because if you're not married, then we just going to say your main hoe and your side chick, all right? And you don't get a raise on your job, but you got higher expenses. And then your main hoe come to you and say, hey, listen, my lifestyle is increasing. And I know you make $100,000 a year, but I need you to give me an extra $500-$600 a month. And I don't know where you're going to cut it from, but you got to continue to increase that. And then the side chicks say, I need you to do the same thing, especially if I'm going to stay quiet. You can't really get rid of these chicks because they said I'm not going nowhere. But then the next year after that, let's say, for example, you had to take a lower position and you bringing in less revenue. So you went from $100,000 to $85,000 a year, but your property taxes went up, your car costs went up, and the hoes are saying, listen, this is the lifestyle that I'm used to, so I need an additional $600 a month on top of the previous months. That was eventually, as the revenue goes down and the expenses go up, something got to give. And you'll file for bankruptcy. I like to try to make it more relatable to people so that they'll understand exactly what's going on, because all of this rhetoric and stocks and publicly traded companies and all of that don't really matter, right? If you are a high earner, let's say you making millions of dollars, because we see it from NFL players, NBA players, former actors and all of that. And they was making millions while they was in the league, but they got an 18-year alimony / child support bill, right? Alimony and child support bill. And let's say you paying her $20,000 a month because that's the lifestyle that she used to. But now you tore your Achilles or it's time to retire and you don't make the same amount of money. And no matter how many podcasts you try to start, you don't generate the type of revenue that you generating, but you still got the same bills because you never paid off your house. You still got the property taxes that's going up. Still trying to maintain a lifestyle. And your host still want $20,000 a month in order for her to be able to maintain it because she married a baller. That's how athletes go broke within 5 years. And this is how Chicago is going to go broke within 6. Make sure you guys hit a like for the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Listen, when you select a chick, you have to select the chick based off of what your future earnings, which could be downgraded.